What's going on, fam? This is KR Jones of the Off the Strength podcast, and I am here to tell you to like, listen, subscribe, and if you're feeling freaky, visit offthestrength.com. That's where you can go and get more information on us. That's where we can link, we can build, we can connect, and let's make this thing work.
A lot of the experiences that I went through in life gave me a different perspective in terms of how to kind of show up in community, how to have a close family connection, because I was one of 2 or 3 Black families in the neighborhood. And we made sure that every weekend we went back to Chicago and spent time with my grandparents on the South and West Side, stay connected to home.
Living in a generation where only comments getting exclamations. Trying to keep my mental patient. I'm a mental patient, though. I ain't hesitating. No, wish I would, though.
We all have feelings. We might just not be attuned to what those emotions are. And so we might not be able to know how to name them, honestly.
That's how whiskey and relationships and feelings work. I know how I feel. Yeah, that ain't who I am. No, I've been looking back. Yeah, trying to understand. Yeah, I wish I could cry. Yeah, but y'all made me a man. So I just wonder why I be the way I am.
Some of the things, the traits that I have picked up around masculinity have not been positive, and I see how I reenact those traits outwardly.
At what point am I an alcoholic? Say what you all want, but my whole childhood I was a target, and I can't call it. Yeah. When I was 11, got robbed, now my man's pop. Since then I knew I was alone at the end of the day. Knew it's only me, and I couldn't truly count on shit. That's real.
What's good, everybody? What's good? Welcome back to yet another episode of Off the Strength, where we're giving you the inside look into all things wellness culture. I'm a trainer called Tony, and of course, with me, I have a gentleman of extraordinary league.
KR Jones is in the building.
That's right, folks. We are back. Peace and much love to brother Corey at home, still getting well. And ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, listeners of all type from near and far, you are now in store for a treat because we have a very special guest dialing in with us today. Now, Brother Jones.
What's the word?
I think you might recall when I was talking to you about a nice program that I had to be a part of with the Moth.
Oh, you're storytelling.
Storytelling.
Okay.
I'm trying to be a better storyteller by and large. That's one of my life goals. I really want to be translated. I want to be understood, but I got to tell the stories of all the amazing people that I come across. And luckily, I was not the only storyteller inside that room, Kyle, because if they would have waited on me, I probably would have dropped the ball a bunch of times. I got to meet a great amount of people inside there, but this person that I got to see on instinct, first sight, I'm looking in, I'm seeing the room. You know how you can peep the room and you can see everybody's Zoom?
You was being nosy.
I was being nosy. I was all up in everybody's screen. That's 100% what's going on. Devin already knows where I'm going because immediately, the first conversation that I had, I saw a wall with legitimately every record that I listened to in life. And it was something that gave me a message that this was home. This came from a very specified place. And I'm talking about a wall of records where you see songs in the key of life. I'm talking about you seeing all different types of powerful records that really shape the person that I am today. So I said immediately, I was like, oh, we going to be friends.
Oh, you were a moth to
I was a moth to the flame that he was putting out there. I see what you did. I see the way you took it. Ladies and gentlemen, please let's make a warm round of applause for Devin Niecy. What's going on, Devin? How you feeling?
Hey, what's going on? I'm feeling great, y'all. I'm feeling great.
Yeah, that's what's up. I am fantastic, Devin. Happy to see you. Happy to hear from you. And I can't wait to let everybody know about the power of your storytelling as well. And we got a way in particular that we like to kick this off, Devin. Now, for the listeners out there, they're going to need to understand where you were when you first fell in love with this thing that we call wellness. Why don't you break that story out for me? Let me hear that.
Wow. Where was I when I first fell in love with wellness? I would say I was in high school. And we had to do some volunteer hours, just to kind of get that community service right under our belt, to kind of really tap into, the areas of compassion and human service. And so I decided that I was going to volunteer at a senior living facility. I grew up so much around my grandparents on both sides of my family. And, elderly, aging folks are, close to my heart. And so I spent time, really just kind of providing services, whatever they needed, whether it was just kind of walking down, the hallways or, kind of helping them in their rooms get adjusted to, their nighttime routines. doing a little cleaning up in the bathrooms, just kind of helping folks out. And I saw how much it just kind of made their day, honestly. And ever since then, I think my grandmother just kind of like really encouraged me and just said, "Hey, you got a gift. You're drawn to people, and people are drawn to you. So, continue to nurture that."
Mm-hmm. Reminded of Bill Weathers' grandma's hand.
Of course.
We had to play it. We had to string it up. It's going to be a lot of music references inside here, Devin. I know you appreciate where they're coming from, Yeah, that attention, that care, and that really the knowledge that you get from these resources that are in these senior homes that, unfortunately, we don't necessarily look to them all the time for the vessels of information, but this is walking history that you coming through in high school. Can you share with us a lesson that you might have got inside your time working in that direction?
Well, I mean, high school was a little ways ago. It was about 20 years ago. So
you can't tell over here. We got that shea butter on you. I'm seeing it. It's like we looking strong over on that side.
Yeah. I could immediately think about just a lesson learned around just patience. At that particular time of anyone's life, older than 75, they have a different pace of life. They're seeing things kind of slow down a little bit. And as much as I was young and quick and ready to kind of go with life, they taught me how to kind of just take things with stride, to be okay with things not always moving as quickly as I wanted to, but at the pace that I needed. So definitely patience.
Right on. Patience in high school. Brother Jones, how you feeling about learning that lesson early on? My friend Kyle over here is an older soul too. So I know that truthfully, he
young man, but an old soul.
Young man with the old soul. He picks up a lot of these lessons. So how do you feel about that patience being a lesson in high school, brother?
As soon as you said you were talking about the community service, I'm originally from Baltimore, Maryland, and we had to do service learning hours to graduate high school. And like, that's not a New York thing. So immediately when you said it, I'm like, all right, this person obviously ain't go to school in New York, because I know what that's like. But, just speaking to that point, for me, it was one of those things that I looked at like, man, why do I got to do this to graduate? Like, I don't even really want to be in a community like this. And one of the things I had to do was I had to help Obama get elected. This is dating back to when I was in high school. This was like that 08 rally. Like, we had to go door to door and canvassing in the neighborhood just so I could get like community service learning hours to graduate high school. But thinking about the lessons I learned then, and then, even to your point of just being with people at a different pace of life, like you just pick up so many different gems. Selfishly, I just would want to know, could you add some texture to like where you were in high school and like, what city, like what was the feel like around at that time?
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's kind of interesting because it seems like our worlds cross paths, because currently I'm in Beltsville, Maryland. So I'm down the street from where you grew up. But at that particular time when I was in high school, I was in a suburb of Chicago called Naperville. So Naperville, Illinois was one of the richest, most affluent communities in the country back in like the early 90s. This was when Chicago, particularly when the crack epidemic happened, white flight took flight, and my parents had a settlement. And so they said, well, I want to raise my children in an affluent neighborhood. And so they took us to Naperville. And I was a part of a community that was, one, rich in money, but, a lot of the experiences that I went through in life gave me a different perspective in terms of how to kind of show up in community, how to have a close family connection, because I was one of 2 or 3 like Black families in the neighborhood. So like I hung out with those 2 or 3 Black families, and we made sure that every weekend we went back to Chicago and spend time with my grandparents on the South and West Side, and stay connected to home.
Just wanted to let that sink in for a second, because that is a sentiment that I know is palpable to today, the work that you're doing, Devin. So even just at that early age, you see those seeds being planted. And when you first fell in love with it, can you take me through where maybe the maturation of that and the different investigations ended up going? Because I do know that you still are very much present in the communities, and let the listeners know what you're working on now and like where you're going, like how that first love ended up transitioning into all the stuff that you're doing today.
Like I said, when it was the early 90s, I was, 6 or 7, and we went to this, very, very white neighborhood in the northwest suburbs of Chicago. And I was struck. Like, I was in a very, predominantly Black and brown community called Bellwood right before that. And I missed my friends. I missed my church family at the time. I missed, my extended family. And so having kind of that dual relationship with where I lived and where my heart felt connected to, I always made sure that I didn't lose that part of me, my roots, my connection to Blackness, my connection to queerness, my connection to transness. And so a part of my identity, specifically around transness, was connected to my grandmother on my mother's side. She had a very open home. She allowed people in the neighborhood to come get a hot meal. She allowed, family that lived in the building to make sure that they had what they needed. She supported, folks in terms of furthering their personal endeavors and making sure that they benefited from the social communities and resources. I saw how my mother and my grandmother treated people, even if they weren't blood family. And so I saw that respect that my mother got just when she came, we would come on the weekends back to grandma's house. I saw how the family responded to her and was just they thought she was a celebrity. I was just damn. That's Auntie Cal here, And so I'm damn, she getting respect from the family and the community and the people at the church, it's just her. It's her character that literally paved the way. And so, the work I do now is specifically for Black, queer, and trans people, specifically because there's so many hurdles and barriers for a lot of us to get the resources and the support that we need. Kind of like what we talked about earlier, Tony, was just some of the basic needs around housing, food, and hot water. People are struggling to figure out how to just kind of maintain that in their day-to-day life as well as during a pandemic. And so during 2020, I realized I needed to create some support just so that people can see themselves represented, whether that's in identity or just in their own struggles, and really let folks know that you have somebody that looks like you who then probably been through a lot of the same kind of struggles, even though I might wear it differently. But it's not about, gathering everything that I need and then looking back and saying, I'll pull you up. I'll walk with you along the journey. I'll slow the pace down and go through this with you if you need that support. So yeah, started my own business just a couple months ago in Maryland to provide support and services for people who are navigating their mental health, navigating housing circumstances, financial circumstances, food stamps, basic needs to survive, to thrive, and to live.
That hits close to home, and I love every aspect of that. Brother Jones, what's your feelings on that side?
Devin, I just want to take this time to just champion you right now for taking that stance and building that community. I feel a lot of times people often are scared to be what they want, or even to just, fill that void of a space where they just don't see someone that looks like them, and I think being able to, as you said, slow that pace down and walk with people. That's something that you learned at a young age, and, being with your grandmother and your mother. I guess my question to you would be more along the lines of, as you were growing up, aside from the family aspect, was there anyone else that you saw and kind of molded your life after? Was there any pivotal people that you looked towards?
That's a challenging question, right, for me as a trans person, because it's on one hand, I looked up to my uncles and I saw that they were kind of, living a life of having a wife and children, but the ways in which they engaged with their significant others or their children wasn't, it wasn't upstanding to me. They were navigating some challenging things around their own masculinity and, what it meant to be a man in this world. I think they were kind of internally struggling with how to find that kind of compassion because they didn't receive it, and so I had to kind of, take from a little mixture of some of the men in my life and some of the women in my life. I kind of really molded myself after my mom. She was someone who literally held the heart that I wanted to kind of present in this world. Maybe not the physical image, but definitely the heart. She walked in this world with love, unconditionally. Even if she didn't have the awareness or the language to kind of understand her child at the time, she knew how to see me for who I was, regardless if she understood my story. But like I mentioned, my grandmother lived on the west side of Chicago, and she allowed anybody to come into her home. And there's a woman named Lexis. She's a trans woman of color. And I remember when I was about 4 or 5 years old, and when she walked into the room, she held her own. She knew that she maybe stuck out a little bit because, maybe she didn't have the resources to, put on makeup or the clothing that she wanted to wear. But regardless of, how she was probably treated out on the street, she always walked into my grandmother's house with dignity and got the respect that she deserved from our family. And I saw that she did that at a very early time, probably in the 70s and the 80s. At that time, it was probably called cross-dressing, but she was living her life authentically. And I knew at the age of 4 that I wanted to live my life authentically as well. And so I continuously searched for that feeling until I was younger. So it was a mixture of my mother, it was a mixture of my grandmother, a little dibble or dabble of the masculinity from my uncles, and just truly kind of like following, me, like I'm just kind of following my own kind of my heart.
And I think that drives you in a lot of spaces that I've come in and learned to know you in today, Devin. And for me, if I'm following the same in your footsteps, following that heart and understanding, I really do believe that ignorance is a curable disease in my heart of hearts. I really do believe that a lot of people might not understand, and I don't use ignorance as a pejorative. I'm ignorant to a great deal of things, and I make it my business is to go out and find all the areas that I might be ignorant in and educate me. And if people give me something, that's the greatest gift that you can do, is really help somebody understand what's coming on, that gift of perspective. How do I move around? So in your story, you're talking about identity in some aspects. You're talking about the definition of masculinity in certain aspects. You're talking about what seems to be like generational conversations that are happening inside here. And I really want to be deliberate about unpacking that with intentionality. For me, and for anybody that's listening out there that truly wants to be in the direction of being an allyship and being enabled of understanding how any of this conversation could really be, okay, where do I need to be alert? How do I need to be responsive, and how can I be in help of the things that you're doing with Black Talk Services? Like, what are some of the hurdles that allies need to know about, need to identify, need to take ownership of, so that we can be in a better position to be responsive and helpful in a meaningful way?
Yeah, that's always such a loaded question for me to answer. But, I believe that we all have feelings. We all have feelings. We might just not be attuned to what those emotions are. And so we might not be able to know how to name them, honestly, because maybe we were seen and not heard. Maybe we weren't asked the questions of how do we feel, what do we need, because it's what I give you, instead of, asking with intentions. And so when things make us feel uncomfortable, I oftentimes ask people to interrogate that, to ask the questions of why do I feel uncomfortable? And if it's typically leaning towards because I don't know, because we live in a society where we feel like we should know everything, to lean into what we don't know and to ask the question, I'm not sure what I'm feeling right now, but I'm picking something up. And maybe you have, insight as to what I'm feeling. And maybe you can share with me, what it is, that's making me not uncomfortable, but, like what are some of the dynamics that are being felt in the space, whether it's gender dynamics, race dynamics, social economic dynamics that are kind of creating this space that makes this unevenness of discomfort. And so I walk into a space pretty often and people assume, based on my race and my gender, who they think I am. Mm-hmm. And 99% of the time they got it twisted because I was socialized to be a white, straight woman. think about that. I was raised in an all-white neighborhood. I was, conditioned to act and walk a certain way in life, to speak a certain way just because of the influency of, white is right. But my identity, and who I truly hadn't evolved until a lot later in life. And so, people have to kind of think about the texture of like, what is gender? What is race? What is identity? What is time?
Yeah.
And really think about like, I'm a 35-year-old Black trans man, but, I've been navigating my identity for the last 4 years. I'm still learning about my masculinity. I'm still learning how to socialize with you as another Black man, right? The language in which we speak is different, but we have to kind of integrate language at that point and understand that, there's a social construct that just because we look the same, we might, have similar experiences, but, we can spend hours just unraveling the fact that, my experiences have a lot of different like texture, like a lot of different feelings to it because of the ways that I've interacted with them in the past.
Absolutely. That work comes through. And that's why there's a resonance in even just your reflection and recollection and breaking that out. I know you have, from what you shared with us before in that in the storytelling segment, you have a worldliness in that perspective as well. So that I also identify that as a huge part of the identity. So your overall worldliness and what I would identify as a love of travel, a love of being in different cultural spaces, not being afraid of doing the very same work that you're identifying as this is what people should do. Well, I know you have practical senses of that because of what you shared by means of what you have to do to travel, and making that extension to talk to people. How does that story play out? And how did that impact the way that I hear you think about the world?
When I started traveling, it started from like when I was younger. My parents, they made sure that, we were exposed to different communities, different places and spaces. And so, that started off with family trips. We would go to Disney, that was cute. We would go back to Arkansas where the family's from. Being able to pick up and go just felt liberating. It felt free. It felt, like possibilities were endless. It felt like things were just outside of just, home. When I realized that my identity was much a part of who I was, and I knew that I wasn't going to really quite be able to explore that as much as I wanted to at home, I started to look for my way out. I wanted to, be able to kind of connect and relate to other people who probably held similar identities as myself. And so I realized that college was going to be that opportunity for me to figure it out, because that was the expectation for me to go to school and to be educated. And so still, it wasn't enough because school wasn't my thing. I didn't learn like other people. I'm a creative. So I needed to, have hands-on experience.
Yeah.
And so I said, well, let me get me an art degree, because I have a family full of visual and musical artists. And when I started to study about, world arts, I was like, well, shit, I need to go visit these places. And so I started to travel. I did a study abroad program and realized that, okay, if I can travel outside the country, then that's all I need. I need to just go and be with other people who look like me and might be able to, share similar experiences. And I think that intuition was just nurtured between me and my mom's connection. She always used to say that I was a wise discerner. I used to have insights about things that, I would pick up on the other people's like spiritual like connections versus just like the fleshly connection. And so I started to tap into that. I'm just like, all right, it's other realms of life. Like it's not just this fleshiness that I can connect with. And I used to just allow that to lead me. And it's so hard to sometimes explain because I can just pick it up. I'm just like, all right, I'm not vibing with that energy. Let me just go on over here, or I'll see different signs, or the number that's been following me right now for the last 10 years is the number 51. Literally, I'll catch 51 everywhere. And I'm like, all right, bet. that's where I'm supposed to go because that's my number, So I guess, as you were kind of saying, like, as I started to travel, I realized that, it was okay for me to lean into some of those things that did kind of bring up fear, because I feel like the human reaction is to provide comfort and support and safety and love and security. And when someone is in a state of fear or, they're feeling troubled by something, I feel like people pick that up and naturally want to caretake, And so I allow myself to take risks because that allows me, one, to make mistakes and then to learn. And then I'm usually learning from somebody else when I'm taking the risk because I'm forced to like rely on somebody else to share their insights, which then allows me to then find an opportunity to relate to them, even if we don't share maybe the same language.
When you first felt that, how freeing was that moment? That snap. I know exactly what you're talking about. It was like, oh man, I'm trying something that I don't know if I necessarily have all the rules just yet, but something happens that shifts and you get a little bit of something from that. Take me through that story.
First time I ever felt that, I think I started having these moments before I even knew I had like memory, honestly. This is at the very, very beginning of my story. So I don't know if you were around, Tony, when we mentioned this in the storytelling event, but my family and I had a tragic house fire. And me and my sister were nursing at the time. We were 4 months old. And they say that, babies have a very keen sense of, awareness when, they're young. And I guess we alerted my mom to wake up, one, because we were probably either hungry or two, we smelled something. And so when they woke up, they realized the house was on fire. So I think she was just always kind of conditioning me to know that, like, you have an intuition, you have to trust it, because you're going to come in contact with so many people that might pull you different directions. But you got to remember that when you feel something, you have to, like, that's a natural response to investigate that. I'll kind of talk about the most recent situation. I was in Maryland like a couple of days before Christmas 2020. Yeah. And I told my partner at the time, I was just like, hey, I need to go back to Chicago. I think my grandfather's in the hospital. At that time, honestly, like, I didn't know for sure if he was in the hospital, but like my intuition said he was. So I said, let me get on the plane. So I hopped on the plane, got back to Chicago, and it was Christmas Eve. And I connected with my uncle. He was like, hey, you talked to your grandmother? I'm like, nah. He was like, well, give her a call. I'm like, all right, cool. And she was just like, hey, your grandfather's in the hospital. I'm like, I already knew that. Like, I said it, I already knew it. And sure enough, on Christmas Day, I get to my grandmother's house, and I'm spending, my last day with them. My grandmother and my cousin were at the house. We were playing some of his favorite music on Pandora. I was feeding him some cheesecake on a sponge, and I had, kind of those moments like I had in high school, just slowing down with my grandfather, and making sure that I had the closure that I need, because I know that, what most people in life feel, because I used to work in hospice as well, what most people feel at the end of life is, either regret or wishing that they had more time. And so I just wanted to make sure that I spent that time with my grandfather and to, listen to my intuition. And I'm so glad that I made that decision at that particular time to go back home. It's been his last days with him.
Devin, I got to tell you that I've had almost to a T that same Christmas. It wasn't in 2020, but it was in 2019. And I don't have the words for it. I don't quite understand intuition the same way, but I don't even think words are necessarily the thing that encapsulate everything that you just put into the space. It really is an energetic, a deeper learning that I just don't have the bandwidth or the capacity to understand. But I want to say that I truly do appreciate and understand the sentiment that comes from that, and you using your power, using your gift, and using the things that, you don't need to be bound by the typical definitions for that. knowing something, having a higher connection, having that vibration that leads you to move in that direction and move with integrity, I have to champion you for that. And I have to say thank you for just even putting that onto the spectrum for what people can understand. And also condolences and just the level at which you have the bravery to share at. I'm inspired by it and I'm motivated by it. And it really does take me back to, I know that exact scene. Everybody else is having the Christmas cards and everything else. It's a different, more sombering kind of note. But I do understand it. I do see where that's going. Brother Jones, where you at on that side?
I mean, just to echo that sentiment, I remember my grandmother. I was basically raised by her. That's where my old soul comes from. So from the time that I was born to the time that I was 10, when she passed, like I was with her. And one of my biggest regrets was not continuing that relationship I had with her with the rest of her siblings, because she came from a family of like 12. And, when you have your grandmother, that's almost like a personal relationship you have. And then that's like my great aunt, but it ain't, it's a little further apart. But to share that same sentiment, I remember being in college and my aunt living in Georgia and just having that feeling like I need to call my aunt. I need to get in contact with her. And I called my mother, and my mother, I was like, can you give me her number? Because I didn't have a number at the time. And I called, I didn't get a response. But that following week, apparently she had fell like in her house in Georgia, and they had to go get her and bring her back to Baltimore. And it was just that feeling that I knew, like, to Tony's point, you can't really put that kind of stuff into words. There isn't really a vocabulary for it. But when you know, and I think it takes a lot of spiritual attunement to get into that type of knowledge. It takes a lot of confidence and just knowledge of self to know who you are as a being, to then understand, okay, this is this feeling that I have, and this is what it means when it comes out, and this is how it's expressed, So to Tony's point, I definitely want to champion you for sharing that and being so candid. But what I did want to harken back to, which, selfishly I'm curious about, would be earlier you mentioned, masculinity, seeing it amongst your uncles, and then also, redefining your identity, within the last 4 years. My question to you would be, how do you, what is the process like for you defining masculinity right now in a space where it's evolving and it's changing? The definition of what we used to know and, how it presents itself today, what can you just, add a little bit of texture to what that's like for you right now?
Yeah, honestly, at this particular moment, I feel like I'm looking to really kind of lean into like asking for support, mentorship, because I feel like a teenage boy, and I'm sure you all had that experience where you're just kind of feeling free and maybe wild and in a very like youthful sense, but what it means for me, just in terms of just redefining it, is realizing that some of the things, the traits that I have picked up around masculinity have not been positive, and I see how I reenact those traits outwardly, just because I was in a 2-parent household, but I believe that a lot of what I was picking up was, some feelings around like my dad kind of having to struggle with his own masculinity in terms of like feeling secure in his identity. I grew up with a father who was a paraplegic most of my life, still is a paraplegic. And he was understanding that, he wasn't going to walk in the world like he used to. And I saw how that impacted his mental health and how, his emotions got the best of him. And so I realized that, there's work to be done around masculinity for me, because, I wanted to, like, he wanted to control, his feelings versus to work through his feelings. And sometimes I want to control my feelings, and I need to work through them and or project my feelings versus realizing that, there's probably a circumstance or a dynamic happening that I just haven't dealt with before. And so I want to show up differently, basically, in the world. And I know that I can't do that alone because again, I'm having to relate to people throughout my life and throughout, you know, my identity of navigating masculinity. And I'm looking for, you know, brothers. You know, I have a couple of brothers here that I've kind of grown close to, but they're also navigating their own. So a little bit of what I'm trying to do with Back Talk Services is create opportunities for mental wellness, but also mentorship, where either cis men or trans men are, you know, supporting others throughout their journey to hold each other accountable to the work that they're, you know, doing in the world, versus, you know, just perpetuate the same kind of narrative that we're used to.
Devin, I would hope that you feel like you have, at least in myself, and I speak for, you know, I know what my brother Kyle's intention is, but I feel like I hope that you know that you have a couple brothers that are here for resources as well in that direction. And especially in that, you know, the accountability portion and where we can show up and really try to help move that narrative forward and advance that. I really do want to shift the culture in the direction where I see the horizon is going to be, because I really do think that that's where that, you know, that Sam Cooke change is going to come from. You know, in that I have to see, and again, I hear a life of service that is amazing and it's inspiring and it's something that, you know, through and through, Devin, I can see how that is something that you couldn't even hide if you wanted to. You're going to be here, you're going to be in service of people, and you're going to put that everywhere. Devin, I have to ask, when do you show up for yourself? And what does it look like to give back and fill up your own cup? Because I know you can do a lot and you will do a lot continually to be amazing for everybody else. But how do you show up for yourself?
Sometimes it's small things like making sure I get a haircut every 2 weeks.
There we go. Staying sharp.
Feel good.
You're going to help me out on my, you know, the lineup game on your side is a little tighter than mine. I need some help on that for real. Like, I really do need to understand how I get my shit good, but you know, that's a whole nother sidebar. We're going to get to that.
I can maybe recommend a barber, but
come on now.
But you know, things like that. Again, traveling allows me to kind of just get out the routine of, you know, working. I enjoy making sure that like my physical well-being is taken care of. So prioritizing my physical health. I love basketball. So if anybody wants to get their ankles broken, you know, I will be on the court every.
Yeah. See, I straps up. You know what I'm saying? So I'm with all that smoke. Whenever you're ready.
I like it. I like this energy. We're going to come back in here dropping buckets. I love it.
So yeah, I mean, you know, and just love watching movies and good listening to music that always restores my soul. Enjoying the sun. I'm a June baby, so being outside is always my thing.
See, I was right there with you in July between the music and everything else. I know why the nourishment is here. That's why I said I didn't even need the words. It was that felt energy. I was like, "Yep, you just got a new friend right here. Just got in the corner."
Yeah.
I love it. I love it. And Devin, just kept staying in that direction and staying through. You know, there's going to be a day when, you know, some of the restrictions between getting people together and gatherings and traveling and stuff like that is going to go a little bit easier. Somebody who I know who loves to travel and somebody who's going there. What's some of the like destinations that you might have in your mind that you really can't wait to get to, or the next big trip that you're thinking about?
Well, since I'm on the East Coast, this is my first time living on the East Coast, and I have a car. So I'm going to just, you know, ride around on the East Coast because, yeah, the cluster of states over here is just like, I used to always be like, man, I don't know what are these little places, but I'm going to just start traveling to them, you know, and just, you know, if I need a couple of days away, go spend 2 or 3 days in an Airbnb and, you know, Connecticut, or, you know, drive up to New York. And
you better be coming to New York. Come on now. You know you got.
Oh, you already know.
Come on now.
You already know. You already know. But major trips, man, you know, I mean, you already know I done been to 5 continents already, so I might be returning back to some of the continents that I've been to before. I definitely want to get back to Africa at some point. Mm-hmm. Just, you know, spend as much time on the motherland. But We'll see. I'm kind of sporadic sometimes with my traveling, so it might be next weekend. I might go somewhere. So we'll see.
All right, if you end up in this New York area, I need that call on this side.
Hit us up.
And
Absolutely.
I will watch you cross Kyle over. This will be on our Patreon. I will make sure that we give all possible attention to this.
Right.
You see how he does all the talking on the sideline because he doesn't actually play.
I'm not a basketball player. I'm never going to claim to be.
Understood.
But did give you buckets. Let the record show.
Sliding past that, Devin, you've got your hands in a lot of different things, and you're building communities. You're doing the work. The question to you would be, what does success look like to you? What do you have an end goal in mind, or what are some of the wildest things that you would want to accomplish?
Honestly, existing as the man that I am today has been the biggest success of my life. Honestly, sadly, because mental health is real, and suicidal ideation is huge, and the LGBTQ population. I honestly didn't see myself past like 25, and me and my partner was talking the other day, and she was just like, did you not, have an idea of, long-term commitment because you couldn't, visually see yourself represented, at the end of the aisle? I'm just like, absolutely. So I'm literally, writing the plan out of what the next, 10, 15 years is going to be for me. And that's why it's important that I start to kind of build, connections and relationships to other Black men right now, because, I'm discovering what I can be, As you said, Tony, I can't hide that my work is in, service to other people. I can't even hide it, and there's limitations to it, but, I'm in the process of figuring it out at this moment. So I'm going to continue to exist and to thrive in my Blackness and my transness and my queerness, and continue to share love and be love and be light.
Inspired by that.
I mean, I can't put anything else on that, man. You have this glow. It's almost crazy because you're in the darkness and the lighting you're in, but like it comes off the screen. Like you can feel the warmness. So that same warmness you talked about with your grandmother being in the neighborhood, like, and having that celebrity kind of feel, like I feel that, and I can see it in you. So
real talk.
Without even, and this is my first time meeting you, this. So this isn't even smoke. It's just like I see that in you, and I champion that. I want you to continue to write that story because it's endless. What you can do, what you can become.
I mean, Devin, if we started this thing in the storytelling space and we continue to go down the storytelling space, I don't know if, again, you might have to give me some of the words from the intuition side, but it seems like this might have been destiny, something pushing us in a direction in some way, some shape or form. So whatever we can do to help continue that story and to make that story as big and as bright and as bold and as explorative as it needs to be, my brother, I will let you know right now that that's what I'm trying to do for you. And, just like we want to do that, we have to ask something that we'd want to try to be in service of anybody that's listening out there, because to live in that same direction, we'd like to start off people with that first step of their journey, because that's the most important step, and having somebody who's been traveling all over the place and all the information that you've picked up and you have that you use readily. If I were just starting my trip and I'm standing on that doorstep, and that first step is the biggest one, what's one gem that you would give me to arm me to be prepared for whatever journey I'm going to go forward in, that this thing called life can be, you can share with me off the strength that would help me get in a better position to where I am today?
First of all, you're never alone. You're never alone. And although, you might be like navigating this journey, for the first time, it's not, there's been others, navigating similarly. And so trust that you're going to meet people along the way. They're going to support you, and to remember always that you're loved.
You're not alone. Going on this journey. Remember always that you love. Brother Jones, what's your thoughts on that?
I got nothing, man. I welcome it. I appreciate it. Thank you for sharing. Thank you for being here.
Yeah,
you know?
Mic drop on him, Devin. That's how I knew you was gonna come in here, hit him with that, that glow. And everybody out there watching and listening is gonna need to know how they can keep up with you, how they can be in support of whatever you got going on. So at this point in time, could you let the good listeners and the good viewers out here know how they can keep in touch with you and how they can really be out and be in a position of being in support on this mission?
Absolutely. So you can find me on Instagram at back.talk, TALK.services. You can also email me at backtalkservices@gmail.com. And I'm actually working on the website. Hopefully it should be done in the next 2 weeks, if not less, at backtalkservices.com.
All right, we make sure we make the list for everything in the show notes so everybody can understand where to go. And again, Devin, just thank you so much for being who you are, what your mission is. And I knew from that first sight all the way through till now, again, I don't know the words for it, but it was like, okay, there's a connection here. Got to make sure that I'm in service of this, and I got to make sure that, again, see these brothers over here trying to be in that same circle, brothers that you need on that side. Let me know whatever you need. I want to be in that position for you.
Absolutely. For a lifetime, brother.
Absolutely. We're here for it. And we're going to get this mix. I still need the playlist, Devin. This is the only thing I got to gripe with you about. That all this stuff. We talk about all this good music. I still ain't get my playlist.
No, you're going to get one. At some point, you're going to get a playlist.
That's exactly it. When you pull up to New York, I'm going to be expecting it. You know that you better have the tune.
What's that?
All right. Much love. Appreciate it. Once again, it's been another fantastic episode of Off the Strength. I'm a trainer called Tony.
KR Jones.
Peace and much love to everybody out there. Until next time, we'll see you soon. What's good, everybody? I'm a trainer called Tony, and I am here from the infamous Off the Strength podcast, asking you today, listeners, viewers, wherever you may be, to please like, listen, and subscribe to our podcast. This is how we're going to continue to be able to deliver you the best goddamn wellness information out here. So if you want to keep hearing this and you want us to keep growing, you are a part of this show just as much as anything else. So please go to offthestrength.com. Make sure you check out our blogs. Make sure you check us out on IG. And if you're hearing this voice and you didn't hit that subscribe button, know that Kyle is going to come looking for you.
You got that right.